You don't want your employees to be idle, so why would you want your robots to be idle? Zebra Technologies is addressing idle robots by bringing their latest solution to the market, which requires 30% fewer robots, resulting in increased asset utilization and a cost-effective entry to automation for your fulfillment operations. The Zebra Symmetry fulfillment ecosystem is bringing you balanced utilization, more cubic capacity, and optimized pick paths so you can operate at peak performance. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Learn more at zebra.com or click the link in the show notes.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Camp Jennings, and he is the co-founder at Henry North. And Henry North is a search firm and talent company in our industry, recently created and founded by Camp. So we're going to dive into a little bit about his experience in the industry and what kind of led him to found this company. And we're also going to talk about kind of what's going on in the warehousing industry in terms of talent and what to look out for within the market and, maybe how to get your next role too. So Camp, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate that intro. I'm doing well, excited for all things to come here in 2025 and excited to catch up with you today.
Definitely. Happy to get you on here. Happy to talk about this. Before we dive into the talent side, why don't you give us kind of a little background on your experience in the industry and, what you've been up to prior to founding this company?
Yeah, of course. Would be happy to. So, Kevin, for the past 10 years or just shy of, I've been in the material handling space with a forklift dealership in the Southeast, Carolina Handling, a Raymond dealership. I sold for that organization for 4 or 5 years. And then for the past 5 years, have been on the sales leadership side of things, leading most recently as a director of sales, a team of 50 or so sales guys across the Southeast, taking those Raymond forklifts, but also all types of integrated system and allied product to market. It's been a blast. I certainly never imagined or grew up thinking I would find myself in this industry, but I tell people all the time, it's such a hidden gem. It's a hidden gem for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, selling that type of equipment, I'm sure you see a lot of different types of operations and, over 9 years, I think you said there, especially, as seeing the evolution of probably a lot of operations too, and kind of what's happening there within the industry. So I'm curious, going from selling forklifts right now to, doing a talent company, why did you decide to kind of make this move and start this new business?
Yeah, gosh, for so many reasons, but I think perhaps above all, it was some of the lessons I've learned as a leader in that space, learning that the importance of having the right people on the team is really the name of the game. As you go to attack your market and to serve your clients and build the culture that you're after internally, it really all comes down to having the appropriate people on the bus, if you will. That is a simple message, but it's one that's so profound, and one that I've really latched onto in my time. Additionally, I saw a very massive opportunity to take that message to market and to help organizations out there who are really in the midst of transitioning from perhaps once being a forklift company to now hopefully becoming more of a systems integrator. The type and level and scope of talent that these organizations can find themselves looking to attract today, it's much, much different than it was 9 or 10 years ago when I started. And I think there's an opportunity for us to add some value as a result of that understanding.
Interesting. Yeah. And you talked there about the the difference from, when you started in the industry 9 or 10 years ago to now. So I guess tell us a little bit, is it like a gap in the market that you see there in terms of the talent? I mean, what are you seeing that's, maybe a little different, and, what's kind of, I guess, created this itch that you got to scratch here with this company?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the entrepreneurial itch, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
it burns from deep within. So it
Okay.
was going to come at some point. I think the recruiting piece and the opportunity or gap in the market is, again, as it pertains to the type of talent that I think are making the most impact today as opposed to what once was. I
Mm-hmm.
actually, Kevin, posted on LinkedIn today something a bit silly, a bit funny, but very, very real. I said that, a Georgia Tech engineer with loads of charisma, he doesn't want to go tell his friends that he's joining a forklift company. He wants to tell his buddies that he's joining a systems integration organization that is driving industrial automation. So it's just such a different. And I think there's a lot of organizations that are still trying to play catch up with that recognition. That's the biggest gap we saw. The other gap is just from the recruiting and talent acquisition side in general. In order to attract that talent, it's so much more than just finding the specific person or candidate that you're looking for. It's branding, it's top of funnel generation in terms of efforts to attract that type of talent. So there's certainly some opportunity there as well.
Interesting. And now, are you looking to focus on placing talent within, like as you just said in the example, like system integrators, like solution providers, I guess we'll call them, or within like an end user perspective, or both? I mean, what's kind of going to be your focus?
Yeah, we're going to start. Great question. We're going to start with the suppliers. And so the forklift organizations, MHE groups, OEMs, systems integration companies, automation, robotics, supplying the supply chain as opposed to the end users themselves. There is such massive opportunity to help the end users as well with their talent needs, especially at the shift level. But then you get into a whole nother can of worms, if you will. So I think we have some ambition to get into that space eventually. But to begin, we're going to be doing purely permanent placements into that industry referenced.
Gotcha. Okay. Very interesting. And so from, obviously there's other talent companies out there. There's other like search firms and things like that. So what are you kind of, as you're, kicking things off here, what will kind of be your differentiator, do you think, versus, some of these other firms that are out there?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. I think a handful of things. We obviously set out with a load of differentiators, but a couple I'll highlight today. Number one is that we're true industry insiders, true leaders that have walked in the shoes of both the clients and candidates that we will now serve. We've all worked with recruiters in the past who have none of that experience. And as a result, their attempt to understand the challenges you were faced with in trying to find and attract that top talent is just that. It is a challenge for that person to help and to add value. Additionally, I think we're gonna really try to be relational, Kevin, and not transactional. We have certainly all worked with recruiters in the past who they just leave you with some type of gross feeling because it's clear that they're chasing that next payday. They're not really curious about you and your goals or your organization and its goals. It is very transactional. I need a sales guy. You got a sales guy. Here's 30 grand. Talk to you never. We want to do anything but that. So that's our mission.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point there too, on the side of, I think it really is like a differentiator to have someone, providing any type of service really that's had experience in the industry, right? That they're providing a service for. I mean, I think that, yeah, and I've certainly, talked to people, now, and also like in my days as a warehouse manager and plant manager where, they're coming and they're trying to do a transaction with you or sell something to you, and it's very obvious they don't understand the industry that they're even selling to, right? And I think that, that creates certainly some problems, and I think frustrations along the way when you're trying to explain something and then they really don't understand like what you're talking about. So I think that's a great thing that you have that experience to be able to say like, well, this is the reality. Like this is really, what happens, and these are really the expectations. And, I've been in this type of role before from your perspective, right? And be able to do that. So I think that's a great point there. Absolutely. Now I'm curious too. I got to ask you because your name is not Henry or North. So tell us a little bit, like where does that name come from?
Yeah, of course, would be happy to. So Henry actually is my first name.
Oh, it
So
is?
that's
Okay.
where that came from. The North one is a bit more unique. So
Mm,
my co-founder is Scott Smith. His first
mm,
name is Gregory. He had no desire to make this company named Henry Gregory.
okay.
So he wanted to use a different word. Scott's got an awesome baseball career. He played
Mm.
collegiately. He went on to play in some minor league systems. He played for the famous Savannah Bananas.
Oh yeah.
So
Okay.
he was a really good ball player. He had a coach coming up that used to always, in his very simple ball coach mind, always tell his kids, just make sure you always head north in life. Head north, go north,
Mm,
go north, go north. And all he meant in that was just to push yourself past what you're comfortable doing, right? To push yourself past the level of complacency, to challenge yourself and the status quo, to head north, to go towards the unknown. And it was just a message that really was profound with Scott as he was coming up and becoming a man himself. And it stuck with him ever since. Even though it's such a simple message, it's stuck with him. It's a post-it note reminder for my co-founder Scott. So
mm.
together we put those things together, Henry North, and we're off to the races as Henry North.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Definitely. I think that's great to be, and it makes sense too, as people are looking for new roles, right? I mean, they're trying to head north in a sense, right? And so I think it's great to tie that back there. Definitely interesting. So now we talked a little bit about the evolution of, jobs that are out there and just the industry in general, right? And you mentioned that, someone, a Georgia Tech engineer coming out doesn't want to say, I'm working for a forklift company, right? They want to spice it up a little bit. But we've seen certainly, some companies, with new kind of interesting titles. I know specifically, like I've seen some companies now that have like chief automation officers, for example, or like heads of innovation, directors of innovation, or, focused on, more of that automation or robotic side, and, just an expansion on kind of these maybe more technical titles in a sense. And, so I'm curious, I mean, what do you see kind of around these titles, and what are some of these kind of newer titles that you're seeing companies start to create as job roles, and, how are they kind of navigating that?
Yeah, you're all over it, Kevin. I've seen a lot of that as well. And,
Mm,
and hats off to those organizations that are pushing themselves to implement those new titles and to attract that unique level of talent, possibly as a result of said title. You kind of referenced that a lot of these organizations are simply getting more technical,
mm,
especially the ones that historically were not. And I think those titles are purely a reflection of their efforts to do just that. You're now looking to attract a talent that has that technical aptitude. It's a different skill set that these organizations are pushing themselves to find, at least the ones that are doing it appropriately and are keeping up with today's time and today's challenge. So I think that's purely what you're seeing there. I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that, especially for the forklift organizations, the MHE groups who are trying to catch up and trying to change the customer's perception of them.
mm,
Anyone that knows me says I say this all the time, but a customer's perception of you is your reality. So if you, an old forklift company, think that you are a systems integrator, right? You've fully evolved from being a lift truck company. Well, great. That's cool that you think that. But what if I go ask 100 of your customers? How
mm,
many of them are going to tell me that that's how they perceive you? So I think some of those titles that you referenced, Kevin, are in efforts to, one, attract that unique skill set, that different talent than those organizations have had in the past, and two, to work more towards getting that customer's perception to match the perception of themselves.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely see that, right? From, like a forklift side, and definitely, from, somebody that was maybe traditionally just like a racking installer, right, is now trying to get more into the automation things as well, and trying to bring that talent in to be able to do that and accomplish that. But I think that's a great point there, is like, how do you how do you change the customer's perception in a sense, right? How do you get them to, not think of like, oh yeah, well, you guys are the ones that do racking, right? Well, we do a lot more than racking, right? Like, so how do you, change that perception? And I think that's very interesting there. So, I mean, how do you, if you look at the talent market, right, and you see, some of these newer roles being created, more technical roles, or, just in general, the open roles that are out there. I mean, how can someone look at those roles and, interpret like what's happening within the industry and what's happening within the market? Like, what kind of signals does that give us?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're all over it with some of our conversation and dialogue just a minute ago. You're going to be able to quickly see, and anyone can see, that as a result of some of those new and fresh and unique technical titles, you can clearly see the direction that this industry is headed. You can also use titles and the changing of job opportunities, both in quantity and how long they're posted. You can, and sometimes, check the progress that a young organization in this industry is making or potentially lack thereof. There's obviously so many young organizations pushing to get into the automation space. You can learn a lot from the types and quantities of opportunities that they have, how frequently they're posting those opportunities, and their pursuit of finding talent. Unfortunately, not all of those young organizations will make it. And you can actually see some of that firsthand just by watching their efforts to recruit talent.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a good point too, because, there's certainly a ton of like startups, right, that have popped up in our industry focused on different things, whether it's AI, automation, robotics, all different types of things within our industry, which is exciting, right, to be a part of. But to your point, right, like, how many are going to, make it for the long term? So if you're, looking at some of these roles and, there is, an exciting startup, I mean, how do you, as someone that's looking for a role or, potentially contemplating working for one of these startups or, new technology companies that are coming out, how do you properly kind of evaluate that and understand, like, okay, is this a risk worth taking?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Should I be excited or afraid of AI? The answer is yes. It's both.
Things are going to look so different in the next couple years. You will not be ready for the disruptions that are going to come.
I'm Jeff Nielsen, host of Digital Disruption, the go-to podcast for technology leaders.
Our generation's conflict, I think, is going to be emotional, not economic.
The companies that are going to win are the ones that have a couple of characteristics.
Stay ahead of the curve with Digital Disruption. Available now on your favorite podcast platform.
Yeah, it's such a good question because there's so much out there, to your point, that due diligence and consideration is incredibly important. I think a lot of it, Kevin, is based on what you as an individual are looking for. Some people are looking for the organization and to be a part of an organization that has been around for 60 years and you know what you're getting into. Some people are looking for small, some people are looking for large, some people are looking for young and possibly a bit more entrepreneurial and possibly a bit more risky as a result of that. So a lot of it's just based in who you are, what makes you operate the best professionally, and trying to align that with the organization that you're considering joining. Beyond that, Kevin, of course, product market fit is going to be super important. But for the most of these organizations, even the young one, there's some semblance of product market fit. Otherwise, they wouldn't have raised $25 million to get to the point in which they are. So more important to me, Kevin, is the people in which you are considering joining, especially in those leadership positions. Maybe it's my simple mind here, but the people is what it's all about. Who are you going to work for? Can you trust that person? And is that person going to trust you? So that's what I would encourage someone considering making a change today. Yeah, keep the product in mind. Make sure they're going down a good path in terms of market fit, the whole 9 yards. But far more importantly, Kevin, it's who am I going to join? Do their values align with mine? And as a result, will this partnership work?
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point there too. Like the people definitely matter, right? I mean, you see so many times on, how many posts on LinkedIn do you see where it's like, oh, well, people don't leave the job, they leave people, right? And I mean, it's kind of like this cliche thing that people say, but it's definitely very true, I think, in a lot of matters. So that's a great point there. So but how can somebody, if they're looking at a role like that or something of that nature, I mean, how can they leverage a firm like Henry North to be able to help them navigate that a little better?
Yeah, I think for the first time, this organization or this industry rather will have a recruiting firm that understands the industry, the players within, the trends within, and where a lot of these organizations are headed. We're going to know and will continue to know more firsthand of the hiring managers and the leadership teams firsthand. So I think it's just simply consultative in nature. We're going to try to get to understand these candidates and their goals and add value as a result of what we learn about them. So I think it's pretty simple. I don't want to overcomplicate it. I think we can just be a liaison and essentially helping guide people looking for their next home.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it's great to, to be able to have somebody to lean on and help you kind of navigate that a little bit in a sense. And I think, going back to one of your differentiator points there, I mean, I think it's great that you've been, in that position too, in a sense, to be able to understand that and, understand like, okay, well, this is, what this organization, yeah, this is going to happen, or this is what the expectation should be here. So very interesting there. Now I'm curious too, because you mentioned, you're going to start out focusing on like MAG provider, solution provider side of the market. Now, do you see, and maybe some advice here you could give us too, for people that are on the end user side of the market, right, are currently, whether it's with a 3PL or a retail or whatever, involved in operations in their day-to-day, how can they leverage that experience to maybe come to the other side of the table and work for a solution provider?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, such a good question. And frankly, Kevin, I don't think that we see that transition happen as often as it could and probably should.
Yeah.
Why I say that is the value that someone that is working on the end user side can bring to the supplier side. It's just so profound. They understand the perception of the customer that these people and these organizations are setting out to serve. They understand it better than anyone else. So I would just encourage anyone in that position. Maybe you're in an engineering title with one of these end users or an ops leader title. If you're considering making a change and getting out of the warehouse space within the four walls of that warehouse is enticing, would strongly encourage you to consider making a leap into one of the organizations that was supplying you. It can be such a massively profound fit for the candidate and the client, for the customer that they would go and join. So yeah, great question. I simply just don't see it happen often enough.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think that, going back to, we're talking about these startups, right? I mean, you see a lot of these, to your earlier points, I mean, you see a lot of these startups come out and, they're coming out from like a tech side and experience, right? And it's like, a lot of them I think is interesting because you see them and they've come up with a technology solution, right? But they're trying to find where can this have a practical application, and a lot of times they find it on the on the warehouse logistics side, and which I think is awesome, right? I mean, it's very cool for our industry, but but then do they actually have that in the operation experience to understand like how can this really apply, and is it really something that if I bring it to an ops leader, they're going to be like, oh yeah, actually I'm really concerned about this problem, right? Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, well, we're going to do all this, and then they're like, well, that's not really a priority for me right now, right? So having that experience on the team, I think, makes such a difference to be able to understand, not only what actually happening in an operation versus, what maybe, marketing or a book is going to tell you, and having to be able to speak that language too, I think could be a great value driver for a lot of these organizations. So if you were like an ops leader, What type of role do you think an ops leader would, naturally kind of fit into on if they were to switch to like a solution provider side?
Gosh, yeah, good question. I think it totally depends on the organization in which they would be joining, to be honest.
Mm.
I think getting back into operations is a possibility, but ideally, I think you want to do something that's still customer facing or at least customer interactive because
Mm.
you obviously understand the customers better than anyone else. So something in which you get to put yourself in the shoes of that customer and add value to them firsthand. And that can be so many things. But yeah, I think it just totally depends on who they're joining and the opportunities within, based on kind of where they want their career to go as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a great point actually, because they were the customer, right, at one point, so they understand kind of those pain points. So, very interesting there. So now, as we look here in 2025, right? I mean, what does the market look like? What does the hiring market look like? Are we seeing an uptick in hires? Seeing decline? What are you kind of seeing out there?
Yeah, fully expect it to be a pretty wild year in a good way in terms
Mm-hmm.
of hiring. I think 2024 in talent acquisition, especially in some spaces, SaaS being one of them, was really difficult. 2025, I think we're going to see a bounce back even in industries like SaaS, but also in this industrial space. These organizations are pent up and ready to spend money on projects that they have been researching and considering for a year or two. So the suppliers, the people that we are going to serve, they are going to be in a fun situation to then go and take care of that customer demand. As a result, they're going to be looking for profound levels of talent to then go and get those projects over the finish line and then implemented. 2025 should be a very exciting year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm very interested to see, how that grows. And I think a lot of people, you were probably seeing on, you were on the sales side, right, before, and you're probably seeing that a lot of people were kind of holding back a little bit on the spend side, a little uncertainty, like what was going to happen here. And now, I think that I think too we're going to see, people finally be like, okay, like let's invest in these projects, right? And I guess tell us a little bit too. I mean, how does, when that kind of, when the pocketbook opens up in a sense, right, and that the money starts to flow into projects, I mean, how does that have like kind of a ripple effect back onto these integrators or solution providers? And, what does that do for like the job market on that side?
Yeah, it should only make the job market hotter and hotter. It's
Mm.
going to put a lot of these organizations in a position in which if they weren't proactively hiring or if they didn't sustain their levels of talent through what may have been a slower year in 2024, they're going to have their backs against the wall in 2025. They're going to find themselves with opportunity and potential for revenue above which possibly they have ever eclipsed in the past. As a result, they're going to be making a mad dash to attract the best of the best talent that's available. Ideally, I think the clients of ours, the folks that are going to be positioned to win the most, are the ones that stood strong through what may have been a slower 2024, and they still have all 50 of their engineers. They still have all 120 sales reps. They didn't shed any weight through a quieter year, and as a result, I think they're going to be in a position to serve their clients better as we get back into busier times in 2025. But again, for the ones that maybe didn't take that approach and have possibly shed weight, they will. They're going to be working hard to find folks to help them take care of the clients and the business that will be coming their way.
Very interesting. Yeah. It's interesting to see like how that all kind of ties together and the ripple effect through the industry, right? So very interesting stuff with you here, Camp, and really interesting to hear your perspective on kind of what's happening in the market, and also learn a little bit more about your new company, Henry North. And yeah, I think we're all definitely looking forward to more jobs out there and more spend on projects. So it's good to hear that from your perspective. And now if people are looking maybe for their next role or will be in the future here, what's the best way to get in touch with you or learn more about Henry North?
Of course, Kevin, thank you for having me. So I think our website would be the best place for folks to go. It's henrynorth.com. There you'll find my personal contact information, both cell number and email, camp@henrynorth.com. And Kevin, I would encourage anyone on the talent side to reach out, even if you're not actively looking for a position or looking for a change. I think it could be good for both sides of that equation just to simply get to know each other. Same for the clients, right? Maybe you're looking for talent today, or maybe you do everything in-house. So you think, don't know if we have a relationship or need a relationship with those guys. Would love to still get to know you. I think at some point we could add some value.
All right. Awesome, man. We'll definitely put all that information in the show notes here, as well as at thenewwarehouse.com, so people can easily find it. So, Camp, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.